feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun. Open wide for some soccer.
I don't care what you think about what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the Cowboys.
Call this college rule.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm Chris. This is Dom. We're here talking sports. Please give our YouTube channel a subscribe. We're always here recording at Engle Studio, which is for all your recording needs. Please also follow our Instagram, the Sports Experience Podcast, and also our individual Instagrams if you want to check that stuff out.
Quality comedy, quality podcasting, quality sports, man. Come on out. Smash that like button. You don't even have to like sports. It's just funny and enjoyable.
We're releasing 2 episodes a week, and who are we talking about today?
We are talking about Alan Shearer.
Yeah, we're talking soccer. How about that?
Yeah.
Alan Shearer, all-time Premier League scorer, and probably one of the best strikers, if not the best in his era. So here we go.
Let's get into it. Alan Shearer, born in the Gosforth area, Newcastle upon Tyne. God, I love these British town names.
Yep. Little township, and then, so he's pretty much born in Newcastle.
Yeah, let's call it Newcastle. August 13th, 1970, son to Anne and a sheet metal worker named Alan.
Yep.
So he's got some big shoes to fill for
And,
a sheet metal worker.
Always encouraged to play soccer.
Uh-huh.
From a young age. He saw that he was one of those kids just with potential and with coordination as a young kid.
I love when parents do that. They're just like, you'll probably be good at this.
Yeah.
But aren't like, crazy stage parent about it. Just more like, no, go out and have some fun with your friends and burn off all that childlike energy.
So he ends up playing for his Newcastle School 7-a-side, which is just a smaller version of soccer, which is very popular for the younger kids, and they say it's very beneficial, which we don't do here. I don't know if anybody can tell.
Really? America's not good at soccer? I would have never known.
We just don't do the fundamentals. It's horrible. And then he went to the Wallsend Boys Club, which is just one of those youth factories that pumps out, good soccer players.
And you see that all over the world, except in America.
And he ends up getting tryouts with a couple of teams like Manchester City and I think West Bromwich or somebody like that. He ends up getting a tryout with Newcastle, but they say no, and he ends up going to Southampton, which for the time Southampton was very into playing young players. So that was kind of like their philosophy was bringing players through and not paying them a lot so they could play and that kind of shit.
Well, it's beneficial because he called it the making of me, that era, where it's just like, we're just throwing you in the deep end of the pool because this is how we do things here.
Well, it's one of those things where he had to move essentially to the other side of England, and they were saying he's going to be all on his own. And it really made him to be, a professional soccer player because he saw really what it was.
Yeah, what it took to get to that level. And he kind of realized, I'm all about this. One of the things I wanted to bring up from when he was a kid, he had said he always wanted to be a midfielder because they were always involved in the game. You were the most involved, and that's kind of like a leadership quality I think that he had, is he wanted to be involved, in every aspect of the game and be the guy to win games for his team.
And you're totally right, because he said that he was like, I always want the ball, but he was so good at being a striker from right away. They were just like, no, you need to go up front.
It's the Replacements quote. He's like, I want the ball, coach. Winners always do, Falco.
Yep. So 2 years at Southampton youth team, they say he was lighting it up on their youth squads. And if it was kind of like today, he probably would have been moved up and played first team soccer a lot more. But he ends up spending 2 years, and then he gets a sub attempt against Chelsea, which was his first little thing. And then literally the next week, he gets his first start ever against Arsenal.
Oh, man, does he? Oh, boy.
And proceeds to score a hat trick. And that's what people were saying was, first start, goes in and scores a hat trick, and then they kind of don't really play him after that.
Which is
it's crazy, but that's kind of the mentality of
You got to bring these guys along.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think it's as
they
much
would bring
that
them
way
along
anymore,
too slow. That was the thing, is they just, if you were 19, no matter how good you were doing, they would always just play you like 13 or 14 games, and they would also put you in not good situations.
Well,
so
shit, like we talked about it with the Kobe episode. They were even doing that in the NBA in the 90s.
Yeah.
Even Garnett in the 90s like that, with the high school players, I mean. But yeah, you were brought along slowly. So the next season, he's only 10 games, 89, 90. And he has 3 goals, and then in 26 games, and then in 90-91, 4 goals in 36 games. But he was the team player of the year that year.
And this is what I found kind of interesting, because at Southampton, they really run it as a single striker. So he's not scoring a lot, but in this last season, they said that he was facilitating. So he was either getting he was opening it up, and his teammates really acknowledged that, of being like, oh, yeah, no, this is our best player.
That was one of the things I read about him, but I also saw is like, even if he's not scoring the goals, everybody's getting a shot off of him. It's almost like from when he was a kid. It's like, I'm involved on every play.
Yep, he was. And this is what I'll bring up later, because I feel like Southampton didn't bring in like the second striker that he needed. So Southampton is obviously just not a big enough club for him. It's just one of those things that they're just like, it's obvious they can't keep him, but they even said it. They wanted to sell him and get a player in return.
Okay.
Which was kind of interesting.
I was going to say, does that happen a lot in soccer? You
No.
always assume guys just get sold,
They
right?
just normally get sold. So sometimes there is a bit of like a transfer, but it's more rare than especially with a big time guy. But Southampton was saying like, hey, we need a striker to replace him.
See, that's what was weird for me, because we've done so many soccer episodes, and this is the first time I see somebody asking for another player.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very rare. And the guy that they picked up didn't want to go. So, this is the thing, is with soccer is they actually have to agree. So you can't get traded. That's why it's so rare. Both players have to agree to swap. He agrees, and he plays like 6 games for Southampton. Like, it was one of the for the player swap, but he ends up getting sold for $3.5 million, which was a record at the time.
Those are pound sterling. That's like legit hard currency.
And it was a record in England, and he gets sold to Blackburn. Now, I want to say this, because when he played for Southampton, it was the first division. Yeah. The summer that he gets sold to Blackburn is when the Premier League comes in.
Oh, no. That's right.
This is when the first influx of money, and the new owner of Blackburn is a local millionaire. And he says to whoever's listening, I'm going to build a team that can compete with the big teams. So back then it wasn't just money. Players would have to go to your club because they know it was a good club.
Yeah, like there was more prestige involved, as opposed to just like being like dumped tons of money on, almost like a Maradona with Napoli.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, totally. So he goes out and picks up Alan Shearer for a record fee and starts building this Blackburn team. Yeah. And the Premier League starts. We see Manchester. This was the thing that everyone said, was he denied Manchester United twice. He said that's not technically true, because they didn't really put an offer. The only people that put an offer was Blackburn, because they were like, we have this money. Yeah, right. And nobody else was like looking to spend that money.
I'm going for the money as opposed to getting Fergalicious with it.
Well, it was just nobody else could even compete, because they were like literally, and it wasn't even overpaying. It was almost like a realistic idea of what the Premier League was going to be.
Yeah, and just straight up value, because by this point, it's not like he's lighting up the stat sheet either. He's still a younger dude.
He's 21, 22. Yeah, I think he's 22.
You're more or less banking on him developing over anything else.
Well, and you see all of this potential. That's the thing. That's what people were saying, was just like, it's a ton of money, but he's going to be your cornerstone player. Yeah. 93, 94. It is really
amazing
when he becomes the Alan Shearer that, because the first season he has a bit of an injury. He's getting into the...
Well, he had the torn ACL in his right leg. Yeah, he missed about half of the season. It was, I think, a game against Leeds.
And he's getting into the system that Kenny Dalglish is running. Who's
from Scottish Fans Invade Wembley, that guy?
So he's there, yeah. So he's their coach. And we see... And this is what I mean with Newcastle having the formation that's correct, is we see in 93, 94, he ends up scoring 31 goals in 40 games and is the dominant striker. And now everybody's just like, oh, that was a bargain.
Yeah, right.
That was what people were saying was like, because it was like outrageous money. Like, how can any soccer player go for this much money?
Literally, then you watch him play and you're like, okay.
Well, literally 2 years later, and they're like, oh, shit, that was an absolute bargain.
It's
because
like
the Premier League
Pippen
is
deal.
no, seriously, because it literally is like the new TV rights are coming in and people are like, oh, we have all of this money. Totally. So England doesn't go to the 94 World Cup, so he has no
postseason almost.
World Cup. Yep. But 94, 95, they bring in Chris Sutton. And this is when you see the best Alan Shearer is when he plays off of a player, and it's this two-striker formation.
Well, Sutton complimented him so well. I think they said this first season Sutton had like 15 goals or something.
They combined for 46.
Yeah.
So Allen had 31, Sutton had 15, and it's kind of crazy to think of because this 94-95 season, they're in the lead for the title the whole time.
Premier League, yeah.
And Manchester United is just kind of like chipping away at their lead. And then the last game of the season, they end up playing Liverpool. Blackburn plays Liverpool, and Manchester United, I think, ends up losing to West Ham. So even though Blackburn loses on the last day, they end up winning the Premier League title. And this is
title is a title, Chris.
Well, it totally is. And this is the only time a not top 5 team has won the Premier League. So every other Premier League has been won by Manchester City, Manchester United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool.
Wow.
That's it.
Oh, God.
And you can go through it as just like that. This is the only time that Blackburn or another team outside of this won one of the Premier League titles. And then this is what, to Alan Shearer's credit, he goes, going into the 95-96 season after we won, Kenny Dalglish goes and becomes general manager.
Yeah.
And they said, we're not bringing in new guys because we feel like the guys who won the Premier League they won their spot.
Chance
they
to
deserve
defend their title,
yes.
basically. Yeah.
And Alan Shearer was like, that was such a huge mistake because we had guys who were just getting old. We had guys. So, like, literally, they go from an unbelievable season to this next season where, as a team, they are not that good.
No, they kind of bottom. Although Shearer still plays awesome for
Shearer,
him.
Well, that's what people were saying was Shearer throughout this, he's the most consistent striker. I mean, to get 20 goals in back-to-back seasons is crazy. He gets 30 in 3 seasons, back to back. So he just felt like there was a lot of kind of shit that shouldn't have happened in this last Blackburn season.
Unpleasantness and friction, and he doesn't last very long.
Well, he said he knew the exit was there. So they were ready to sell. It's 1996, it's the summer, and we get the 96 euros.
Yes, we do.
And this is the thing that international competitions do sometimes is like everybody's like, okay, so this player is going to be sold. Let's see how this tourney goes.
Well, it's
and
like
then
Ronaldinho with the World Cup almost, right?
Their stock either rises or falls. So 96 World Cup, England.
Euros.
Not Euros. Sorry, it's actually interesting because he was not the. Other people thought another striker should have been there.
Well, and it had said in 12 games and 21 months of international competition leading up to these Euros, when Shearer played for Team England, he hadn't scored.
No.
He did not record a single goal in almost 2 years playing for them.
So that's what they were saying was the formation not right for him? Is he going to fit? And they said on the lead up, so like going into the tourney, the coach came and told him, he said, you're my number 9, you're my number 1 striker, and I just want you to know that. And he said like that gave him the confidence to be like, oh, okay. So we see England actually ties Switzerland and beats Scotland and Netherlands. This is all the group stage.
Yeah.
Our boy goal in every single game.
Absolutely.
And that's what they were saying was he was so consistent for England in this 96 Euros. We see them end up beating Spain in the quarters. It was 0-0. They go to penalties and beat them. And then they go to meet up with Germany.
Oh, Germany, England in these soccer games.
In the semifinals.
It's like the opposite of the World Wars as far as records concerned when it comes to soccer.
It's so brutal. If you watch highlights of this game, it's 1-1. It's in extra time. And the other England striker has a wide open goal tap in, and his foot just goes right over the ball. He's like sliding in to get it, and he just misses. It's brutal. And then they go on to lose in penalties to Germany. Gareth Southgate ends up missing. Alan Shearer makes his.
Well, he was a great penalty kicker.
Yeah,
Chris.
He was amazing. That was the thing, was as far as a scorer goes, he ended up having 5 goals in the competition, won the competition's golden boot. And like we were saying, your stock either rises or falls. His goes through the roof because people are like, oh, he can go to anywhere. I thought it was interesting because Real Madrid actually was thought to come in, and they ended up not. He had serious discussions with Manchester United and Newcastle. That was the two that he said were like Real Madrid. He heard about it, but he was just like, there was no serious discussion.
No.
It's crazy to think that he almost went to Manchester United.
Man, they would have been an even bigger juggernaut, right?
Well, that's what he said. He goes, we would have won
probably every year.
They did.
Yeah.
End up winning, but he said he had this like thought of like, who do I want to play for? And he said he had a dream, or like a remembering when he was younger, that he had Newcastle and number 9 on his jersey. And that's why he ended up picking Newcastle. And he went to Blackburn and said Newcastle will pay the now 15 million.
Oh man, 15 million pounds sterling, not on. That's
he goes for the record fee in England, and now he goes for the world record fee to Newcastle. And Newcastle the last year actually got second.
Wow.
So they were a very good team that was bringing in the top striker, and that's what he said. He was just like, I would have felt better winning the Premier League with Newcastle.
Almost the Steven Gerrard with Liverpool. Almost. Yeah, you want to win for your
you want to win for your boyhood. Yeah, your boyhood club. So he ends up, and this is what I found.
He was a Premier League leading scorer his first year.
Well, he was a Premier for 3 consecutive years.
That's what I mean. It's like, God dang.
He ends up getting, and this was the other thing, was his boyhood hero, Kevin Keegan, was the manager.
Awesome.
So that was another thing where he was like, I really want this Newcastle, project to work. 96-97 is when he has his 3rd consecutive with 25 goals in 31 games. Just to put it in perspective, when guys get, and I'm not talking about Messi and Ronaldo, when guys get consecutive, even 15-goal seasons, you're like, oh, we can hang our hat on that fucking guy. He was out there doing 25+ for multiple different teams. You know what I mean?
Teams and seasons. That's what's so he transcends almost a system.
Yes.
As long as you have something cooking, he'll he'll light up that stat sheet for you.
And then mid-season, so they get second the season before, and then mid-season this year,
97-98,
Kevin Keegan ends up quitting. Yeah. And it's actually very interesting because some players came out and they said that Keegan said he lost the locker room and all this shit. And Alan Shearer came out and said, well, that's bullshit. And I'll be 100% honest, I have no idea to this day why Keegan left.
Oh, God.
Because they were literally, it was them and Manchester United. They were in pole position. It was just like that. And he said it was one of the weirdest things that he really has no idea what happened with that instance, because he felt like it was 1 week they were like, oh, we might win this. And then he came out and was just like, Keegan's gone. It was like, gone? What the fuck are you talking about? So they bring in Kenny Dalglish just because they know he's going to fit. It's going to fit. It's one of these things. And at the end of the season, he has one of his most famous runs against Leicester.
Oh, God, this is great.
They were down 3-1. He ends up scoring a hat trick to have them win 4-3.
I'm just going to do this all by myself.
It's pretty much, he was a hat trick kind of machine there for a minute. 97, 98, he actually has injury. So we see this with him when he gets injured. The team kind of falters, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. So Kenny Dalglish was good when he first came in, and then shit fell apart.
Yeah.
They get 13th in this season in 97, 98. And then 98, 99, he's back in form.
Did you want to talk about the rehab where he'd have to pick up the coins?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is what I mean with like weird shit happening was so he gets injured in 97, 98, and then the coaching staff stacked like, what would you even call them? Like fucking tables?
Yeah, like school tables almost. Yeah.
Like almost like this kind of table.
Pretty much, yeah.
And they had him stand on top and like catch different shit like coins and like
have people throw shit at him.
And
just
pretty
to keep
much
his balance.
Yeah, because they were trying to work on his balance, and somebody was just like, I think there's a better way we could do this.
I don't understand this type of English national health sorcery.
So 98, 99, he's back in form, but they have a new manager.
Yep.
New manager, Ruud Gullit, and him don't like each other. And he said this, he goes, it was when I first met him, I could tell he was just kind of like, I don't think you're a good striker, which is fucking crazy.
That's
but
a great way to build camaraderie and,
it's almost like they had
leadership.
too big of personalities, and Ruud wanted to be the man and be like, this is my team, and Alan was just like, no, I'm sorry, man.
Excuse me, I, sir, am a grown-ass man.
So 98, 99 was a weird one, he said. They end up, so they're rivals, so Newcastle doesn't have any other team in their town, but their closest town is Sutherland, and that was like their big rival game. Okay. And he ends up benching Alan Shearer and the other striker.
What?
And it's one of these things where they were down, or Newcastle was up 1-0, and they ended up losing the game. And somebody said if this had worked out, you might have seen Alan Shearer sold in that summer. But they ended up losing, and Ruud Gullit was pretty much kind of like, what the fuck? Well, that's what they were saying, was like, he kind of needs to go.
Well, yeah.
So he ends up getting fired early in the next season, and they bring in Bobby Robson.
Yeah. 2000. Do you want to talk about the Euros first or no? Because he said he'd retire after the 2000.
The 2000 Euros, yeah. That one's kind of a rough.
Yeah, because they don't even get out of the group stage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said that the international... The amount of games that was being played was too much, and he was right.
Yeah, well, no, because 2000 they end up beating Germany for the first time in like 30 years, but they don't end up winning.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a brutal 2000. I just want to say,
going a 1-0 win though.
It's the England international careers in this time is brutal because they should have won more. Like he says it, the 96 Euros they should have won. And even they said the 2000 Euros, they were a better team than they presented.
Yep. Well, they have, and we've talked about numerous players who've played on that team as well. So, I mean, like how to lose in that fashion is nuts.
Yeah.
But 2000, 2001, 5 goals in 19 games. And then 2001, 2002, though, he gets back over 20 again, 23 and 37. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, he's back in his kind of form, you know what I mean? And Bobby Robson sets it up to really work with him because I feel like that's kind of what Ruud wasn't doing, and they get back into form. And he's old as shit by this point. That's the other thing.
Yeah, he's like in his mid-30s already.
What was he born in, 70?
Yeah, 70. So he's like 33.
So he's 33, 34. He's been playing a shit ton of games. 23 goals. Newcastle gets 4th, which is their highest one since they had got 2nd that time. So they're back in the Champions League, which has all kinds of new money. That's the thing is like all this influx of new money where they're like, oh shit, we need to get in the Champions League. Their first run in it was they lost the first 3 games, and then they ended up fucking progressing because they tied and beat Juventus and I believe Inter. I forget who they ended up beating. Some team of guineas. Yeah, I forget. But he ended up having 7 Champions League goals and then 17 goals in the Premier League in the 2002-2003 season. And this is like we were saying. This is when he's 33, 30. You know,
he's just a machine, dude. Unless he's like getting injured, he's on the field doing Alan Shearer things. Like
next year, they qualify for the UEFA, not the Champions League, and he has a bunch of goals in that. They have losing to Olympique Marseille. So, like, we see this Newcastle, like, star, because in this era, he is just, like, the Newcastle guy.
He's like the Tony Gwynn of Newcastle.
Yeah,
like,
really, because they're not
like
winning.
The Red Sox and Yankees of like Man U and like, Liverpool and stuff like that. Yeah.
So going into 2004, 2005, he actually said this was going to be his last season. And I thought it was interesting because you don't normally hear the announcement like that early in the season.
He was just his own guy, though. It's like when he said he would retire from international competition, like before the Euros started, not just like after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he ended up you could see that his play wasn't up to par. It was a bit patchy. He had some pretty good games in the European competition. I think he had actually 11 goals in that season.
Wow.
But then midway through the season, pulls a reverse card. And he literally says he felt like the manager was disrespecting him because he was going to retire. And he's like, well, fuck it. I won't retire. Yeah. I'll play next season.
I will play next year just to spite you. And that's what he did. He was like a player coach the next year.
He comes back as a player coach.
Doing the Pete Rose thing without the gambling.
The thing I end up loving is because he comes back, he becomes Newcastle's all-time scorer. And he ends up scoring, I think, to become the all-time scorer was 202, and he ends up scoring 206 for Newcastle all-time, which I thought was awesome that he came back and did that.
It's his hometown team, man. Like that's like Tony Gwynn. It's the same freaking thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, that was a perfect one. Like seriously, Alan Shearer. I just want to say he has 260 all-time Premier League goals, which I don't know if it'll ever get broken. It's quite the stat. He has 283 first division goals because he had 23 for when he was playing for Southampton when it was the first division.
Yep.
For me, he was the best striker in his era because he made the guy next to him better. And that's something that we just sometimes see, but like for him, the only disappointment was really he did not get the silverware I felt like he deserved. He did have the Blackburn champions, which just them winning that Premier League is ridiculous, but just a little international silverware and something with Newcastle would have been the cherry.
Would have been just like the extras, but I mean, an amazing soccer. I was so like stoked to watch this guy because he was a big dude playing soccer, which you don't see that much of, but like he would throw his weight around, but just like an amazing just teammate and facilitator for a position that some guys are selfish.
Well, let me say this too, because one aspect of his thing was he was really good at everything. So he could score with his feet, he could score with his head, he could set it up. He said that it said that he scored almost 1/5 of his goals with headers. And just because
that's a ridiculous percentage for soccer in my limited knowledge, but
it's really a ridiculous. So if you think about it, I think Messi has 2 goals from his head.
Oh God!
So it's just like a different style of forward. Where you're right, he was a hard nose, like he would get into it and head the shit out of the ball, and like. So I want to get into what he's doing now, post-career.
Yeah, now it's really cool.
He ended up coaching for a little bit, but it really didn't work out. I want to say that. So he coached for Newcastle. They kind of gave him a shot. But now he's doing stuff with CTE. Did you see that?
Yeah, for soccer players.
For soccer
almost like
players.
Michelle Akers.
Yeah. And he even said it because he was known for heading the shit out of the ball. He's just like, I'm monitoring myself because I can see it coming because one of his idols ended up having it. They thought he had dementia.
Oh, no.
They went back in a couple of years later and they found out that he had CTE. And I know this isn't like, we're not supposed to make jokes at this time. The English call CTE boxing brain. You should hear them say it.
No.
Oh, he had boxing brain. And you're just
like punch drunk. Yeah.
Wait, what? No, we're not calling it that.
I mean, granted, it's a very large medical word, but CTE is fine. Not boxer's brain. That sounds like a shitty British breakfast item that has no taste or spices.
So he is actually looking into it and trying to get research because especially the soccer balls back in the day were a lot harder and just a bunch of shit like that. For me, greatest Premier League scorer, and it seems like just a really great guy.
Yeah, and he does soccer coverage, I think, for the
Yes.
BBC still. I mean, he's kept himself involved in the game. It's basically his life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, Alan Shearer, man. Awesome.
Thank you all.